All set. All
You're
right.
muted.
We're going to approach something today that is in the fifth perek of Pirkei Avot, the third Mishnah, and it's a very, very important, super important Mishnah that's learned by many, of course, like the rest of Pirkei Avot. But my sense is that there's a lot more to take from it than most do. So I wanted to dig into it a little more deeply today and really just highlight the life lessons. And for me personally, some of these lessons resonated very strongly in the last few months, particularly on my most recent birthday. So I thought I'd tie it all together and just share some things with you. In order to understand and approach this Mishnah, there are four fundamentals that it's important we own. The first one is the perspective of Hashgacha Peratit, divine providence, from the perspective of Harambam. So this is very, very important. It's a very important piece of Judaism, fundamental of Judaism, ikar of Judaism, to own and to use as we build our lives. And Harambam says as follows in the Moreh Nebuchim. He says that Hashgacha Peratit, divine providence, in other words, the commitment that HaKadosh Baruch Hu makes to be in everybody's life, and we know that that's an overt and it's a commitment that's been reiterated by God tens and maybe hundreds of times. That commitment of Hashgacha Peratit, of direct involvement in each person's life, is not democratic. Meaning, many understand it as saying that HaKadosh Baruch Hu makes a commitment to say, you know what, I'm the almighty being, omnipresent, no limits, no capacity to begin to even fathom what God is. I'm going to shrink myself down, kivyachol, and be involved in each person's life. Great, we're thrilled. Because the opposite perspectives were that God created the world, put certain laws into place, the laws of nature, luck, cause and effect, and then sort of took a step back, but still has some type of general oversight. That was a position held by many of the great thinkers in the ancient world. Harambam comes along based on our Torah sources and says, clearly that's not the case. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is involved directly in everyone's life, but he puts in a slight nuance, which is an explosion in the Jewish world, when he says that God is not involved in each person's life equally. God is not involved in each person's life equally, meaning the person who strives for more gets more attention. To just put a simple, almost trivial case in point. I taught in Flatbush High School and other Magen David Sephardic at the time for a number of years. And with the larger classes, if you have a class of 30 kids, invariably, you can't give the same level of attention to each child. It's not possible. Everybody tells you, we do it, we got it. It's not possible. So what does a teacher end up doing? Putting more of his or her attention, dealing with the whole class, of course. Giving attention to the whole class, of course. But where does that little extra attention go? It goes to the person who's working the most hard, most sincere, most committed, most interactive. So, now deal. That's the same system that we have with God on the planet. The system is that the more a person engages life, the more God engages that person. So that's axiom A that we need to be reminded of as we begin this Mishnah. Axiom B, also very, very important perspective to hold, and not an easy perspective. to hold, but a fascinating one. The rabbis go back and forth at length at the end of Masechet Kiddushin, Gemara Masechet Kiddushin, on how does it work in the world? Is there really reward and punishment? Or is it that a person lives out the reaction to his or her actions? And they deliberate for 5 or 6 pages. Challenging topic. In other words, the person does A. Let's say the Torah says specifically, A will bring reward X or the opposite. What are we really experiencing in life? And in the end, there in true Jewish style, we have an almost 100% answer that says that most of what we live out in life is the perot, the fruits of our actions. And then some of the other stuff is reward and punishment. And this is very important as well, because it doesn't mean we can control everything. It doesn't mean that life doesn't have overarching circumstances that are going to happen to us. And it doesn't mean that God doesn't want certain things that I can't even understand. All that is true. But it's very important to understand that we reap what we sow overwhelmingly. Again, it doesn't mean that when I get a curveball to the head, God forbid, and something very, very challenging, it doesn't mean I did something bad. It means that, generally speaking in life, leaving those extraordinary, extreme experiences out, because again, as we've said over and again, we don't build models in Judaism or in life in general based on the extreme cases. We build them based on the general case. In the general case, we know that a person's life script is overwhelmingly detailed as a result of his actions. So the maskana of the rabbis at the end of Masechet Kiddushin is that it's about the person's perot, the fruits of his labor, more than it is reward and punishment. Not to say there's no reward and punishment in this world, and not to say there isn't a level of arbitrariness in this world. There's both. But the majority of what goes on in a person's life is based on a person's life and where he or she is taking it. Good. The axiom number 3 that is important to remind ourselves of, something we know and some of us have discussed in the past, but it's important to remind ourselves of before we get into this Mishnah, is our rabbis say in the beginning of Masechet Berachot that if a person goes 40 days without a hiccup, he should worry. If a person goes 40 days without a minor stumble, a minor failure, a minor shot to the head, he should be worried. What are you talking about? Don't we all want contentment? Don't we all want peace of mind? Sure we do. But if that contentment brings me to a point where my life is absolutely copacetic and clear and no excitement, go back to point 1, it means that my level of hashgacha pratit, my level of divine providence has been minimized. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is less involved in my life because I'm less demanding of life. Good. And the last point to touch on as an introduction to this Mishnah is that the 10 tests of Avraham Avinu, our rabbis describe them to say that those 10 tests are things that will take place within the development of the Jewish people as a whole, again and again, and within the life of each individual. So this is the bombshell, and this is the most exciting of the points, I believe. And some of the rabbis go so far as to parallel Avraham Avinu's 10 tests to the 10 tests that Bnei Israel, that the Jewish people had in the desert. And others will work to connect it to other experiences throughout ancient Jewish history. For our purposes today, let's go with the perspective that the 10 tests that Avraham Avinu experienced were detailed for the purpose of letting us know that those 10 tests, things like that, will challenge the Jewish people in general throughout Jewish history as we become the most perfect society we can be within a human structure. And those 10 tests will be the same 10 tests that each of us will feel one time or more throughout our lives. Test 1 through 10.
You guys want water?
Test 1 through 10. If a person may get test number 1, similar to Avraham Avinu's, or test number 4, and there might be a repeat on test number 5. So let's just quickly recap the introduction. A, Hashgacha Pratit, divine providence, is not democratic. Harambam, Choshen Mishpat, this is his perspective, and it makes a lot of sense. The more I demand out of life, the more HaKadosh Baruch Hu pays attention. B, that the overwhelming majority of life circumstances are within our control. Not all of them. Not all of them. Not all of them. We don't use this perspective to blame ourselves for things outside of our control. But we use the perspective that the majority of what happens in a person's life is based on the perot, the fruits of his labor, not based on arbitrary world circumstances, not based on luck. Although there are arbitrary circumstances, there is luck and there is reward and punishment, but my life is overwhelmingly built from how I live it. I reap what I sow. Point number 3, if your life is too quiet for a period of a little over a month, worry, because it means that you're not pushing the button hard enough. Point number 4, the nisyonot, the challenges that Avraham Avinu experienced, will be challenges that we as a Jewish people experience as a people throughout our history. And some, as we mentioned, go so far as to say that they were experienced in the earliest stages in the days of the Midbar. Good. Okay, let's move through the nisyonot, and we'll touch on them just briefly, but enough, I hope, to get a sense of what happened and what it means for us. Now, the first of the nisyonot, the first of the tests that Abraham experienced, is one that's not written beferush. It's not explicitly written in the Torah, and that is it's based on the Midrash that Haran and Abraham, based on following their father Terach's direction, religious direction, were taken by Nimrod, and Abraham was first thrown in the Kivshana Esh, in this flaming oven, and then his brother Haran was, and Abraham survives and Haran doesn't, because Abraham is sincerely committed to God, and Haran says, if Abraham comes out okay, I'm with him. If Nimrod comes out okay, I'm with him. And our rabbis base this whole story, which is not written in the Psukim, on the fact that the words Ur Kasdim are repeated twice in terms of an origin place for Avraham Avinu, when in fact that wasn't his origin place at all. So the first of the tests that Avraham Avinu goes through is, we're going to colloquialize these for our own purposes, but it's something along the following lines. Here we are, and let's call Avraham young at that point, because relatively speaking to the amount of years people lived back then, that they should be hadesh to us, relatively speaking, he was young, and he was just coming on board, just committed in terms of his connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So here he is, he makes the connection, he understands life, he moves away from what everyone, so to speak, in that society was doing. He confronts its leaders, his life is threatened by it, and you got to stop and say, well, wait a second, I'm the good guy, I did the right thing. Why does he have the power and he's throwing me into the flaming oven? I don't understand. What kind of life is this? What kind of world is this? How could that happen? So imagine for a minute, and again, we're going to trivialize these just enough, I hope, to be able to get our heads around them in a limited period of time. Imagine a young adult, or us as young adults, saying, you know what, I began to commit myself to learning, to keeping Shabbat, to doing chesed, whatever it was at the time that may not have been typical, may not have been widespread in my social circles. And here I am, the one who took it on, feeling the pain of persecution. What's happening here? Shouldn't I be getting rewarded rather than challenged? So early on in Abraham's process of self-discovery that would become the DNA for us and the Jewish people in total, was the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, listen, you all, you know what? You're going to take steps that are going to be courageous steps, and steps that put you in the path of truth that other people don't see, or if they see it, they don't have the courage to take on. And guess what? That will not give you a free pass. And even though you've taken that on, you're going to get very strongly challenged. Now, I want to put this in a context of a younger adult, because it happened at Abraham's, relatively speaking, younger stage of life. That's test number one. Test number two, which to me is sitting on top of test number one, is just something to almost not be able to bear, but it's only test number two, where HaKadosh Baruch Hu turns to Abraham Avinu and says, listen, okay, you claimed your stake within your homeland. You took your position and you've been very firm and strong in your position. And it's completely different than everybody else. But guess what? You know what? You would think that now you can build your life over there. You earned it. You're not following everybody else. You're not complacent. You've expressed your courageous self. But you know what? It ain't going to work here, God says. We're going to take you from here. Everything you know, everything you've built, even though you've already built it your way. Give me a break. I've already established who I am, Abraham says. I'm not Nimrod and company. I'm not the general program that's going on over here. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, got it. But guess what? Whatever claim you've staked, you're going to have to start all over again in some place that I'm not even going to get into too much detail about. You're going to give up everything you know and love. Everything that gives you a sense of security is no longer yours. See ya. We're done. So challenge number two, or test number two, I would parallel to a person maybe in their mid to early to mid 20s, maybe someone who gets married based on the values that he and his spouse articulated early on, like Abraham and Sarah maybe did, or certainly did. And then something comes and totally rocks their world and says, you know what? You had the courage to do it here. That should have been enough. It should have been enough. But you know what? There needs to be a new claim staked someplace else, in a place where you can't even begin to understand but a fraction of what's in store for you. But I promise you, life, or God says, it's going to be great. I can personally think of challenges in my own life that paralleled that. Maybe you had some in yours as well. The third nisayon is one that I think could have broken Abraham Avinu. Some of the rabbis say it did. Some of the rabbis say he stumbled here when leaving Israel. Is Vayira Av Ba'aretz, and in those days, as we know, the economy was an agrarian economy. There was essentially no other way to earn a living. You either farmed or you supported a farm. in one way or another, or you're herded, right? So you herded cattle, you were a shepherd, you were a farmer, or you were a craftsman that supported those fields. So Vayhira Av Ba'aretz means it's a complete shutdown of the economy. It's Corona, God forbid, right? On steroids, where everything is completely shut down and there is no opportunity to live. Wait a second, Abraham Avinu must be saying. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, didn't you tell me that the people of the land would be blessed through me? That there would be riches? That there would be success? I just got here. There's a complete economic collapse. How could it be? Now, wait a second. Didn't Abraham earn his stripes? Right? Wouldn't you say he earned his stripes? Twice already? HaKadosh Baruch Hu says no. There will be a point where I'm going to, life or me or your belief in Torah or your belief in yourself and all of that will put you in a certain direction within which you legitimately have confidence. HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells Abraham Avinu, this land is yours. You will become wealthy and powerful and bring with your wealth and power blessing to everyone around you. And you know what else? You're going to have children in this land, and this land will become theirs over time. And here we see that Abraham Avinu has nothing, just got there. Our rabbis say that Av was in the first year of him getting to Eretz Yisrael. How do you fathom something like this? Good, keeps going. Then it gets a little bit more challenging when Abraham Avinu goes down to Egypt, and as we know, finds himself in a position where he can't even protect his spouse. Now, wait a second. Life challenges, nisyonot. How far do we want to go here? There was a certain lifestyle established based on great sacrifice, life-threatening sacrifice. Check. Left the place I built that lifestyle in. Check. Came to the land you promised me. Check. Had to leave the land because it's completely impossible to have food to eat. Okay. Now come to a place where Avraham Avinu lo alenu, and I'll tell you, this nisayon became more real to me as a result of Corona, where Avraham Avinu says, and our rabbis make a point in saying that he had very little at this point, that he had very little financially or otherwise, that Avraham Avinu says, I can't even protect what I have. Now in Corona, I'm sure many of us as parents and grandparents, our biggest concern, I know one of my biggest concern was, I can't protect my children. I've never felt myself in a position where I couldn't protect my children. That's a position that most of us as heads of families, as grandparents and so on, we have this inherent belief that we can protect what's dear to us. Now, in this case, whether Abraham's actions were exactly what should have been, or almost what should have been, or not what should have been, they're a reflection on the fact that he feels that he can't protect himself, he can't protect Sarah Imenu, and he almost becomes complicit to Eshet Ish. He almost becomes an enabler of someone being with someone else's wife. Our rabbis struggle with this and say, okay, leaving all the other issues aside, what about the fact that Avraham Avinu almost enabled Eshet Ish? How did he consider something like that? So what is the Torah telling us here? That we may even be at a point, at some point in life, where we can't have confidence that we can protect what we have, including those closest to us. challenging perspective to have. The next of Abraham's challenges, as if you didn't have enough, was the war between the 4 kings and the 5 kings. This is particularly interesting because we know that this conflict between these sort of nation groups, these nation states, was going on for 13 or 14 years before the war took place. And there was this ongoing type of struggle. Over here, we understand that Abraham Avinu was not a warrior. Our rabbis go so far to say in the Midrash that when Abraham Avinu turns to the 318 soldiers, so to speak, there were people who we could gather up. When he turns to them and he asks any of them if they have anything that they've sinned in, and if so, not to come, our rabbis go so far as to say that it was only him and Eliezer that fought the war. Okay, it's a Midrash. But the point is that they were completely unqualified to take on this battle. Completely unqualified to take on this battle. So what was the test here? The Torah goes, sort of makes it a point in letting us know that when it describes the fact that Lot is taken captive, it says, "Vayikhu et Lot ve'et rechusho ben achi Avraham," the son of Abraham's brother. We all know who Lot is, that he's the son of Abraham's brother. Why are you telling me that? You're trying to, I believe, highlight what Abraham's test was here. And then in the following pasuk, it says, "Vayishma Abraham," pasuk or two later, "Vayishma Abraham ki nishba achiv." And Abraham hears that his brother was taken captive. Wait a second. Lot checked out a lot earlier. Why did he leave? The Torah is pretty clear in saying that those who worked for him couldn't get along with those who worked for Abraham. And then the Mefarshim say that their business practices, those who worked for Lot, weren't all that great. Lot chooses the most fertile part of the land that they could conceive of at that point in time, at least how they were living, goes over there and hooks up with not such great people. A lot of time goes by. Lot is an adult. Abraham is a very old man by now. What is Abraham's test? His test is, what is my responsibility to another person? And how does it go? How far does it go? And when does it end? And the truth, when does it end? Is Abraham Avinu obligated to take up arms to become a soldier, whether he had 318 people or not, and fight a war for an estranged nephew who chose his own lot? The Torah answers very interesting. Vayarek et hanihav. Rashi says that not only was he up for the war, but he was zariz. The minute the palit comes to him, the runner comes to him and tells him, guess what? Lot was taken captive. He moves quickly, immediately, grabs whoever he can, grabs what other tools he can fight with, and goes on his way. What is Abraham's challenge? What is his test? I believe it's a test that we all have, more than once. How far does the concept of arevut go? How far do I have to support a parent? How far do I have to support a cousin? How far do I have to support a community member and a neighbor? And the point here is, I think, is very strongly, is that I better be struggling with these things. Someone called me a number of years back, and someone beautifully, superbly wealthy, young man in the community, done very, very well in his business, and wanted to speak about the perspective of tzedakah vis-a-vis his family. And we had a couple of very long, detailed conversations about his responsibility to his family members, to an aging parent, to an uncle who, lo aleinu, had lost a child, to the sibling of that child. What are your responsibilities? And how do those responsibilities connect to your responsibilities to the school your children go to and to Bikkur Chalim and whatever other super important community needs that we have? But the point here is, I believe, that Avraham Avinu is staking his claim, going to war, that these kind of challenges, ad kama arevut, how far does my responsibility go? Those type of challenges, those type of tests are things that we're going to be challenged by, we should be challenged by, and if we're not challenged by them, it means, going back to the introduction, that we've taken a step too far away from important things and we need to re-engage. Okay, a couple more. Abraham is 99 years old. HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells him, now it's time to really make you Jewish. Time for a bris. What are you talking about? Didn't I live my whole life Jewish? Isn't it all about my actions? Isn't it all about what I've demonstrated? Isn't it all about the several tests that I came through, some glowingly, some got through up until this point in the last 50 or 60 or some odd years, depending on whose opinion you go by, when Abraham embraced HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now I have to compromise my health, elderly person, to violate the human body, something that was unprecedented. What's happening? Didn't I earn it? Ah, very interesting. There will be a time in someone's life, way down the road, when he believes that he did earn it, but his credentials will be questioned. His credentials will be questioned. Life is not easy by design. There's the one that follows is the issue of Sarah going down to Avimelech, to Eretz Pirishtim. I struggle with this one. I will say honestly, I don't understand what happened in this test. Only to say the only thing I can that I understand at this point, and I'm open to ideas and suggestions in terms of its context vis-a-vis the other tests, is that at this point Avraham Avinu is very wealthy and very substantial, and here again he can't fully protect what's his. Maybe that's the lesson, I'm not sure, but it's sort of a deja vu all over again. And for me, I'm going to leave it at that. The eighth test was throwing out his wife and son. Now, the Torah makes this test even harder to reconcile because Hagar ends up coming back home later on after Sarah's death. And guess what? Ishmael was 13. Or 13, 14, however old he was. He was a baby. How bad could he have been? He was a child. So our rabbis say that the eighth test was the Avraham Avinu having to throw out the woman who finally gave him hope, gave him lineage. But I want to suggest that there was a mini test before this. And that was when Hagar had Ishmael. And we know it created tremendous friction with Sarah Imenu. And I would suggest that there was maybe 11 tests, and that being one of them, where the woman to whom you've dedicated your life finds herself incomplete and needy vis-a-vis someone else. And how do you continue to express your love and respect for that person when she may have lost it herself? That's a test. Last two. Akedat Yitzchak, as you know, taking Yitzchak Avinu and putting him on the altar. Nothing could have been more antithetical to Avraham Avinu's life than that. Here I am, my whole life, Avraham says, paraphrasing, dedicated to serving a just God, an ethical God. Never was it anticipated that we would go back to human worship. Here we go, this point in life. This is my zera. This is my future. So imagine that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is saying that by design, and if you understand the system, it's okay. By design, there is going to be a challenge at a senior point in each of our lives that throws everything we've done into question. Okay, it's cool if Avraham had to deal with it. I'm okay learning it. I don't mind learning what Avraham went through and saying what a spectacular person he was. I don't really want to go there. I'd rather pass, But what if our rabbis thought, what do we need to know all this about Avraham Avinu for? What do we need to know of that? Do we know all of Yitzchak's tests? Do we know all of Yaakov's children's tests? We don't. There's a certain brevity about the Torah and a certain selectiveness of what's passed along. Why do we know the test? Because we're going to go through it on our own level. Hey, that's the point. We'll finish up and then we'll wrap it together and see how we deal with all of this. And finally, the Makebe Patish, so to speak, the last test, the one you would never even call a test, the one you say takes us beyond the point of what a human being can possibly deal with, and that is builds his life. Yitzchak Avinu is doing his thing, growing, impacted dramatically by his experience, but ready to build in the land of Israel. But for one fact, Abraham doesn't even have a place to bury his wife. Is this my land? Didn't you tell me decades ago that this is my land? I don't even have a homestead. Are you kidding me? Where's my roots? Where's my stability? It's my wife. Where do I take her? Tough. That's challenge number 10. So where does all this put us? It should not put us in a shaken place, although it's a little challenging. It should put us in the following place. Our rabbis say that there are 10 ma'amarot, the previous Mishnah, 2 Mishnayot before this one, 10 ma'amarot, 10 sayings based on which the world was created. And the rabbis ask a very straightforward question. Why did God need 10 created in one? And some of the rabbis say because we wanted someone to know when he or she disregards the greatness of God's creation that they're challenging 10 things or breaking down 10 things rather than one. The other rabbis say, interestingly, that these 2 Mishnayot are connected together. And the 10 types of tests that Avraham Avinu went through, that we as a Jewish people will go through, that's hardwired into the development of the world, into the process. Now, if I'm a person learning this, I might want to say, you know what? I don't really want to know about this. Life is complicated enough. No, but the point is the exact opposite. If I understand that these things are hardwired into the world process and to individual and collective Jewish human development, then I know that I have the tools to withstand the trials. The same way Avraham Avinu did, I do. If I didn't have the tools, they wouldn't be given to me, right? And this process of progress, trial and error, crisis of confidence, discovery, rediscovery, crisis of confidence, trial and error, progress, discovery, process, that is the system. And the reason that it doesn't get me down is because there ain't no challenge here that I can't beat. And every one of these things is brought into the picture to enable me to become me, to enable me to come truly and fully into me. And with that in mind, we'll just pull the last few pieces together and just express it as something that became more just more heightened to me this year, this birthday, post Corona or exiting Corona. We have to know that we will be tested in many or all of these things once or more than once. And there may be times when the test brings us to an absolute crisis of confidence. The purpose of the tests is to reveal to me who I am and what I have, not to crush me, to empower me. And what sometimes happens, which is fascinating, is that my strength, as a result of the tests that I'm experiencing, is revealed to the people close to me so that they can strengthen me. There are a number of opinions on Akedat Yitzhak, on the people who accompanied Avraham Avinu, and where they stood, and when the word got out, and why the word got out, and who knew, and why they knew. And one of the fascinating opinions is that Avraham needed to be affirmed in his greatness by others who heard about his greatness. What a super idea. So this process will continue. The reason it'll continue is because we will continue growing and becoming more fabulous as a result. Sometimes the message, the meser, the learning will be crystal clear to me as a result of the experience. Other times it may be more clear to people around me, and I need to be able to be open to them, to let them tell me how I grew and what I demonstrated as a result of this test. And there's another very important point here. And this is something that I saw very often in teaching young adults in the old days, and I see it now very often with people who are at different stages of their life. And that is that when you fail a test in Judaism, it doesn't mean that you go back. It means that you go forward and up. If Avraham Avinu stumbled in some of these tests, and according to Al Mefarshim, like everybody else, he wasn't perfect in some of these tests, and we're not going to be perfect. But when I'm challenged with something, I have the opportunity to something, and I stumble, it means I go back and go up. If I'm hitting a wall in life, it means my sights aren't high enough. Not my sights are too high. And Avraham Avinu had the perspective that, okay, time to backtrack, time to give up on Israel, time to give up on God, chas v'shalom, time to give up on having a baby. He wouldn't have been Avraham Avinu. And we, each of us, in our own opportunity for our own individual identity, wouldn't be us. So when I get knocked down, I raise my sights. I don't even go like this around. I go over, because it's good, better, best. I don't want good. And when sometimes when I'm tested and I can move through the test with a good resolution, HaKadosh Baruch Hu doubles down. And he says, I don't want Ricky or Jack or Bob or whomever to end up with good here. I want an Avraham Avinu type test. I want better or best. Raise your sights higher. Raise your sights higher. The testing is a gift. We've got the goods to do it. It's hardwired. It ain't going to go away. And when does the testing stop? Never. Is that burdening? It's the opposite. because God wouldn't test me if I didn't have the tools to nail it. So you know what? It ain't easy sometimes. It's painful at other times. It's scary at other times. But guess what? If I have two things, if I have Yirat Hashem, if God is in my life, not as an infrequent visitor, but as a high level, serious, not gumpy, not gooey, not emotional, but real partner in my life, and I experience God that way, we're standing together day after day together. I'm aware of his presence day after day. I might be crying, but I'm not broken. I might be frightened, but I'm encouraged. This is it. It's great. Abraham was the greatest human being of all time. Why? Because he took them on and he knocked it out of the park. And was each one perfect, as we said last week? Absolutely not by design. But this is the way life is structured to be. And finally, another tool that I believe is essential is when we are mitasek b'Torah. Our lives are Torah lifestyles. And that means that I'm just in the Torah zone all day, all day. It's not about keeping this mitzvah, not keeping that mitzvah. Of course, we keep as many mitzvot as we can. But it's my awareness, my zone, my approach to the world. What is my zone? What frames my portal? What colors my perspective? The asek b'Torah doesn't mean to learn Torah. It doesn't mean to do mitzvot. It means this is what I'm surrounded by. This is what I engage in. This is my worldview. So, as we, with God's help, begin to come out of this situation, we need, of course, to continue to be very aware, very careful. And we need, of course, to make sure that we drag with us the perspectives, the heightened sensitivity to Torah that we took on during this situation. And when those challenges come, and God willing they will, because it means you're close to God, you're in his zone, and he wants continued growth, know that God loves me. I've got the tools. Doesn't mean I'm not going to cry at this point, but I have the tools and I will triumph. And you know what? One test, I'll hit 100% out of the park. The other one, maybe I'll hit 50 or 60. But if I'm in it and I'm willing to engage and learn and listen to the people around me who may understand my courage better than I do, then I will be a champion. And when I hit the wall, I'll go like this. Good. All right, guys, any thoughts, questions? I'll just please unmute if you'd like to. Sarah? 1 second. Yeah, Sarah, you were saying?
I said you made a lot of great points. Let's talk about one point. Now, there's the coronavirus.
Right.
Do we have to believe that Hashem sent the coronavirus, or do we take the responsibility of mankind in a laboratory making some experiment that went haywire?
It's all the same thing. It's all the same thing.
But now one is blaming. Now we don't learn how to conduct ourselves in a laboratory.
If it came out of a laboratory, we have what to learn in terms of a laboratory. You're absolutely right, and we have what to learn in terms of God's message. We have both.
Because the message is great.
I'm sorry?
But the action itself, the message is great, but the action itself seems to be humankind.
No, but it's not. It never is. That's the exact point. It's very important what you're saying. It never is. It never is. Now, Haramchal brings in Darkei Hashem, he brings a very nice perspective. He says that the world works with action, reaction, action, reaction, action, reaction. Interestingly, based on the story of Yaakov and the Sulam, he starts it down here. Yaakov in the ladder, he starts it down here. Action, reaction, action, reaction, action, reaction. The reaction, the retooling of the action is coming from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So there is no action that's absolutely independent, and there is no action of HaKadosh Baruch Hu that's absolutely arbitrary.
Got
It's
you.
action reaction. It's a dynamic, absolute connectedness that is in everything.
Wow.
Good.
Thank you.
Great. Any other thoughts? Everybody cool? All righty.
Okay,
Great
thanks,
to see
Ricky.
everybody.
Thank
Wish
you.
Thank you very
everybody good
much.
things.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you
Thank
all.
you so
Great
much.
trip.
Thank you,
Great
Ricky.
Thank you
trip.
all. We appreciate it.
Fabulous.
Bye.
Bye.
Ricky.